of all, thank you for coming, especially given that we have snow out there. We were thinking that we wouldn't have a very big crowd tonight, so we appreciate the support. We'll start with approving the agenda, and we have two new items to add to the agenda. Under correspondence, so 5A, we'll add a letter that we received late yesterday from Bob Grant. And under new business 7E, we wanted to have a discussion about coffee times. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll make that motion.
Please, all in favor? Carried. We have no petitions or delegations tonight, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the December board meeting. You have the minutes in your package, so I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as circulated.
I'll make that motion.
Seconder, please. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. We have some business arising from the last meeting. In December, we tabled 4 policies, which are the beginnings of the governance section for the policy manual that we're in the process of developing. So you've had a chance now to look at these policies, so we'll go through them one at a time, and we'll need to approve them. So the first one that you have on your list is board development. This has arisen out of a recommendation from the Ombudsman that the board should implement a process for ongoing education of the board. And this basically says that trustees are encouraged to participate in development activities. Could I have this is a new policy. There is no existing policy regarding this issue. So if I could have a motion to approve this.
Make a motion.
Okay, Alan. Situated, the seconder.
I'll second it.
Anne. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okay. The next policy that we need to take a look at is called board commencement and orientation. This is quite a long policy, actually. The policy itself is not long, but the attachments to it are long. It talks about an orientation checklist, the usual things that should be covered in orientation. There's a commencement form where trustees are required to provide contact information and their social insurance number. We have an oath for trustees, and we have a handout that's a protocol from Robert's Rules of Order. So could I have a motion to approve this one as circulated?
I'll make that motion.
Bruce.
Something new.
Alan, second. Any discussion?
I understood we were going to do away with that oath of office.
This replaces the current oath. The current oath talks about trustees being required to keep all information confidential. This one specifically talks about keeping confidential information confidential.
No, that's only changing.
Well, pretty well. The one thing that we have changed in regards to the oath is we've also decided that the oath will be done at a regular board meeting. So if it's the AGM, it would be the first meeting after the AGM. For us, we're doing it now, it will be at the February meeting.
So up until that board meeting, at least 3 of the board have not signed this thing.
Right.
You're going to do it before then?
We'll do it at the February meeting. Well, we've gone 8 months without it already, so.
So we can't hold you to anything yet.
Right. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, the third one is called Code of Conduct. It is also a new policy and previously did not exist. It talks about basically the expectations of trustees in terms of carrying out their role. So I'll have a motion to accept this as circulated. I'll make that motion. Anne? Alan? Any discussion about this one? A lot of this stuff is kind of motherhood stuff. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. And the fourth one that we have to approve from last time is called Governance Style. Again, this is a new policy. It does not currently exist. And it talks about, I guess, the way that the board will approach its duties. Things like emphasizing vision, focusing on the future, being proactive. So could I have a motion to approve this one as circulated? Alan? Please. Any discussion about this one? All in favor? Okay, carried. Thank you. Just by way of a little footnote to this policy discussion is that over the next several months, I think we can anticipate a couple of new policies each month as we finish up the governance section, and then we'll start on finance. Then we'll move on to item 4B. We've had a number of meetings in January that we want to report on. And the first one was January 3rd. This was an in-camera meeting to deal with legal issues and related to the litigation. And we're very happy to be able to report that we have been able to recover some of the money from Mr. Galambos. In June, when we made the motion to withdraw from this litigation, there was about $26,000 left of the $50,000 that had been given to him as a retainer earlier that spring. And we have been working ever since to try and get back the residual funds. So we have now received, and it's in our bank account, $26,711.15. I'd just like to add that some of you may have seen a posting on Mary's blog or on the Cumberlander about this issue. We understand that that information came from the lawyer himself, and it did not come from the board. So some people had expressed concern that information had gotten out ahead of time from the board. Okay. So that's what we dealt with in that meeting. And we also made an appointment to the fire committee, and Anne will talk about that when she does her report. On January the 10th, The board met with the MLA, Don McCrae. We had about an hour with him, and we talked about 3 issues with him. And in order of priority, the first one was the water license transfer issue, where UBID is currently receiving conflicting information from the 2 ministries that are involved in this issue. The Ministry of Environment has indicated that they have no intention to require that we transfer our water license to the CVRD as stated in the MDA, and in fact has said that the only time that they would consider that kind of an action would be if the community requested it. The Ministry of Community, on the other hand, are kind of indicating, although it's not crystal clear, that the water license issue will be transferred to the CVRD as part of the MDA with KIP. In the fall, the board sent a letter to the CVRD telling them that we were not going to be transferring the water license because we felt that they didn't have the jurisdiction to compel this. So it's now ended up in Victoria, and our meeting with the MLA was basically to ask him to help us deal with the 2 ministries that are involved, to help us get those 2 ministries into the same room together so that they will make a clear and definite decision so we know where we're going from here. Mr. McCrae is in Victoria this week, and he has indicated that he will get back to us early next week with what he's been able to accomplish, if anything. So we're expecting that he'll call sometime next week. The second issue that we raised with Mr. McCrae was regarding the school property and the notation that's on the school property and the difficulty that this creates for UBID, because in essence we don't hold title to this land. 41% of the property is under a Crown notation and is technically still owned by the Crown. So that has some implications for us when we renew our mortgage this year. And it certainly limits what we're able to do with the property in terms of selling it or subdividing it or doing anything with it. Again, we've asked Mr. McCrae to become involved with that, because what we need is, again, some coordination between the Ministry of Community, the Ministry of Education, and Justice. And we need a really good lawyer in the Department of Justice to be assigned to this case to move it forward. So he hasn't promised us anything in that regard, but he has indicated that he's prepared to go to Victoria and try to get that moving for us. The third thing that we talked about with him is an issue that's not within UBID's mandate, but is near and dear to the hearts of most people in Union Bay, and that's the grants for sewers. We reinforced with him the importance of that for our community, especially if Kensington goes ahead, that the rest of Union Bay needs to be able to hook up to a sewer system. He indicated that there is no money available for grants, but has kind of put it on his list of things to keep in mind. We did agree as a group that we would meet periodically throughout the year to touch base on issues and kind of keep up to date with what's going on. So I think we're pleased that he brought his executive assistant with him, and she and Ruth, I'm sure, will have a number of contacts over the coming months. So that was that meeting. Did I miss anything?
No, you covered it well.
Then we had another in-camera meeting on January the 10th. This in-camera meeting was to deal with a personnel matter. We have an employee who is off on medical leave, and one of the retained responsibilities of the board is the approval of positions and terms and conditions of employment. So we needed to discuss some coverage, and we have approved Ruth to have Sonia come in 2 days a week until this medical issue gets settled. So you'll be seeing her in the community probably more than usual, and we'll see how things work out from here. Then we had another meeting on January the 11th. The only good thing about all these in-camera meetings is that they are getting shorter. On January the 11th, we met to discuss some information requests that have come from some of the people that are involved with the litigation, requesting records for court purposes. So what we discussed were the implications for UBID in terms of our capacity to respond to those requests, and the fact that we do have a bylaw that requires payment for that service. As a result of that discussion, we are seeking legal counsel to determine what our legal obligations are and how we need to proceed from here. So that will unfold over the next little while. And then F is the same as what I told you in A about the money that we've been able to get back from Mr. Galambos. Okay? We'll move on then to correspondence. You have before you a letter that was received late yesterday from Bob Grant. Mr. Grant is not happy with us and has expressed a number of concerns regarding the landowner's update and the content of the landowner's update. You also have a proposed draft response. And because I'm going to be away now, I would ask that we leave this with Ruth, but I'd like a motion kind of saying that you concur with the draft and that Ruth can go ahead and kind of deal with this.
I'll make that proposal to take it through.
Alan? And?
To clarify, that letter was directed to the board and it's being
Yes.
responded to by the board.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, you can sign it, but it would be under my signature or my name.
Okay.
Any discussion? No, not really.
These letters are long on rhetoric and very short on facts. I think it's a waste of bloody time to even get talking about it. I guess we have to.
Well, we have to reply to all correspondence that comes in like this,
I know
especially
that
directed
I
to the
said
board.
that the other day, but maybe I'll take it back after reading it.
All in favor?
Are you going to share the letter?
We don't normally do that, Joe.
Why? Because it's important.
Okay, the issues relate to being quite upset about using the parable, "It Takes a Village to Raise a Child," as the title for our strategic plan, where we put the title on our strategic plan as "It Takes a Community to Run UBID." Quite upset about that parable and use of that parable. There are a number of things in here about TAG, which have nothing to do with UBID, which we're not able to respond to. Volunteers
With respect to,
with respect to issues like fixing the fire hall. So I mean, he's quite angry and frustrated with us, so I don't need to say anymore. Okay?
Well, I
So,
don't,
but we will respond, and we've responded in a factual kind of way, so.
will you put that out at the next meeting? You've tantalized everybody now.
Well, we don't normally
It's
do
not exactly
that.
confidential.
No, don't. It could be me writing a letter. I don't want it all over the place.
We're not here to embarrass anybody, and I think.
I'd want mine read out. I'd want mine read out.
We have typically not done that, and we won't be doing that. So we'll move on to reports. Ruth, would you like to do your administrator's report?
So this month, I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 small issues. We're going through right now the major billing cycle of the year. We're doing the parcel tax and the water tolls as well.
And everyone's here?
Oh, yeah. Do you need me to use the mic?
No.
No, we're good. So it means that in addition to the water tolls, we also bill our parcel tax and send out assessment notice. And for me, this is the first time through this cycle, and it's been an interesting process. I'm aware that people often don't like the format of our bills, but I'm starting to see that it's not as simple as reformatting the bills. In our office, we use a dedicated meter reading software system, and that software we use is called Brightwater. It is an Access-based software program. If you know what Access is, it's one of the suite of Microsoft Office software. And it was designed specifically for small water systems here in BC. I believe that most, if not all, of the small improvement districts on Vancouver Island use Brightwater software. And the primary reason we use Brightwater and not any other water system distribution software is because it is the cheapest. And what I'm learning is that Brightwater is a very inflexible software program. It does a good job of keeping all of our customer accounts up to date and our billings in order. But if anything needs to be changed in the system, those changes can't be made in our office. For example, we couldn't simply add the water toll penalty to the invoices, so there was a bylaw passed, I believe it was in November, whereby there's now a water toll penalty that can be placed on outstanding water bills. But I couldn't simply go in on a bill and say, put in a line item that said water toll penalty this much. It doesn't work like that. So, and that's the same with the assessment notices. The assessment notices last year had a different name, assessor name on it than my name. And so every time you have to change anything, like the hours that the office is open, anything that needs to be changed in that form, what I have to do is I have to prepare a mock-up of what we want changed, and then I emailed the mock-up to the fellow who runs the Brightwater program and developed it, and then he makes changes to the actual program. He emails me a zip file. I take the zip file and I load it on each of the 3 computers so that we now have the new program with the new forms in place. So I just want you to be aware that that's one of the issues that we deal with in a small office, and it's about the fact that we're tiny and we have to rely on the software that's available to us for that kind of thing. So I'm looking at other options. I've been online looking at what other types of meter reading. It needs to be meter reading software, and I'm looking at what other types of meter reading software might be available out in North America, and whether any of them are useful for small water systems. But it was an interesting thing because I certainly was shocked by what was involved in making minute changes to the documents. Staffing of the admin office. I brought this up at one of our meetings with the board, and they said you should point that out to the people in the community. I know there are questions about how many people work in the administration office. Since I've come on board, we reduced the administrator's position from 1 full-time equivalent, that's usually called an FTE, to 80% FTE. So I only come in 4 days out of 5. And we also have 2 part-time clerks. When I got here, they had been working longer hours to man the office without an administrator available. When I first came on, they were each working 18 hours a week, and we've now reduced their time to 12 hours each per week. Except if we become busy sometimes, I will get them to work an additional shift. So our normal current staffing levels for the admin office works out to 1.35 full-time equivalent positions, 1 1/3 person. At times when we're really busy, I will sometimes ask each of the ladies to work an extra shift. So occasionally our staffing goes as high as 1.65 full-time equivalents. So while there are 3 people working in the admin office, since we are all part-time, UBID is currently paying for slightly less than 1.5 full-time administrative staff. I was asked by the chair to advise you what we've spent to date on obtaining the retainer monies back from Mr. Galambos. So as she reported to you, we got slightly more than $26,000, and I've done a review of our files to determine what monies we've spent in order to get that money back. There were several related things being dealt with all at the same time, including extricating the board from the lawsuit, and the law firm didn't set up a separate file for those settlement discussions with Ganapathi, so I had to do some estimates, but I was able to come up with a fairly close estimate of all the bills from May to date, and they total $4,891 that we paid to get the return of those dollars. And I also wanted to mention, I know people have questions about street lights and street lights being out. When I came on board, I asked, well, how do we normally report those things? And I was told we pick up the phone like any customer, and we phone BC Hydro and tell them we've got a street light out. I've determined that there's an actual reporting system for small governments. It's called SLIM. It's Street Light Information Management, and I've set up an account with them. So now if I get a report about a street light being out, it comes into the office, I simply go online, and I can actually identify the pole online in their mapping system and advise them that it needs a street light repair. So that's now in place. So that concludes my report.
Have a motion to accept this report for information. Alan? Cleve? Okay. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, carried. And Bruce again, the finance report. And you should have, you got your financial income statement email too, right? Okay.
So we're now past year end, and I feel like sometimes I've told people these things several times, but I guess it bears repeating sometimes. But when you're at year end, of course, it's possible to see how we did in relation to our budgeting for the previous year. Last year, if you don't include amounts such as capital development charges, which are a capital item, not a revenue item, and transfers from capital savings, both of which tended to overstate expected revenues, the amount of revenue that was budgeted for operational needs was $835,000. At year end, our actual revenue was $806,705.38. If we add in our work in progress at year end, which are unbilled but earned revenues, we have an additional $6,657 for a combined total of $813,362.38. There aren't any surprises in this figure. Each of our largest revenue items came within 2 to 3% of forecasted revenues. The only line item that was not close to what we budgeted for was our rental income. The budget was for $24,000, but we've now determined that actual rental income for 2011 was $13,449.40. It's not clear why the budget for rent was so much higher than actual for 2011. We got the rent from our tenants that we expected to get. We are already aware of this anomaly and have adjusted the budgeted expected rent for 2012 downwards to be closer to actual. On the expense side, we ended up under budget in most areas, except for those areas that I think most people are already aware of. We were $57,000 over budget in audit and legal, and $6,300 over budget in administrative compensation. We expect these overages in the budget to be a one-year anomaly due to the audit costs and the litigation of a year ago. We're planning to spend less and are not expecting to have those kinds of overages in those areas in the next fiscal year. If you add up all the other expense line items in the budget, most of them were under budget, and this actually resulted in overall expense to be about $26,000 less than we budgeted for. The books for 2011 are not yet final. In addition to the usual accruals and adjustments, there's still a few items that will be moved from expense and capitalized at the time the audit is done. We had 2 capital projects last year, which resulted in expenditures of approximately $1,000. One was the...
100,000.
What did I say?
You said one.
Oh, 100,000, sorry. We're all very small organizations.
Yeah.
One was the purchase of the fire truck and equipment, and the other was the Nelson Loop. The funds for those projects came from our capital funds. However, we ended the year on a strong fiscal note, and at December's board meeting, I was instructed by the board to move $100,000 of our short-term funds into our capital accounts. So this means that we ended 2011 with almost the same amount in our capital funds as we started the year with, even after those capital expenditures. The amount currently in our capital funds is $439,000. When I look at the future, I think we're going to face pressure in the following areas. Insurance costs appear to be going up quite a bit right now. It was really noticeable when we renewed our insurance. We are significantly under budget last year for all but vehicle insurance, so I'm hoping this year's budget will cover the increasing costs of insurance. Employment costs tend to rise over time, and this year there will be increases in the employer's share of EI for all employees, and our benefits premiums are a form of insurance, so they too can be expected to rise. The other increasing expense is related to building, utilities, and vehicles. We use oil to heat our main building and propane to heat the fire hall and gas in all our vehicles. These costs appear to be increasing as the cost of oil and gas increases. For now, we need to keep an eye on this item and also keep our eyes open for opportunities to decrease our energy costs. The primary way we've all anticipated to accomplish this is by moving our admin offices and our fire hall to more energy efficient premises, even though we all know that it's a few years away. Other than those items I've mentioned, I don't anticipate any significant changes in revenues or expenditures this year over last. I'm continuing to look at areas where it might be possible to save money while providing the same levels of service as you've come to expect. And that concludes my financial report.
We have a motion to accept the financial report for information. Anne? Bruce? Any questions or discussion? No? That's good. I'd just like to add, because we had not many people at our December meeting, and you might be interested that at the December meeting, the board instructed Ruth to put $100,000 into capital, which represents, I think, an amazing feat given the predictions that we were faced with in May when we were looking at the budget. That if we had continued on the course that we were on, we thought that we would have huge financial deficit, primarily because of the legal and audit issues. Although that particular line item, and although the cost of paying overlapping administrator salaries over the summer were over, the other areas were all under, so that we ended up with $100,000 that we could put aside into capital. That $100,000 is made up of 4 different kinds of things. One is about $25,000 of it is capital expenditure charges that we collected this year, and that must go to capital. We have no choice on what happens with that. Ruth was able to recover about $12,000 from 2010 for GST rebate. We got a second GST rebate of about $20,000. And then the remaining $40,000 of that was basically from the 2 programs, from the fire department and from the waterworks department. We asked them each to try and save $20,000, And we've all been very frugal, so that's how we generated that $100,000. So, all in favor of approving the financials? Okay, the next report is yours, Ann, fire.
Okay, there was no fire rescue committee meeting in February. Our meeting, or in January, in February, we'll deal with some work-safe BC issues still outstanding at the fire hall. As I reported in December, we have, and you've read in your landowner's update, we did all the drainage work there, so that's all out of the way now. I'm also happy to welcome Dennis Hayner, who's sitting over here, as a new member of the Fire Rescue Committee. Thanks for joining, Dennis. The fire chiefs reported that the department has responded to 6 incidents since his last report of November 2011. They included 4 first responder, 1 motor vehicle, and 1 rubbish fire, so not very much. And that's my short report for tonight.
We have a motion to accept Dan's report for information. Please. Any questions for Ann? All in favor? Carried. Okay, please. Public Works report.
The Public Works Committee met on the 5th of January. Superintendent Dan McGill gave his monthly report on the water system over the past month. The heavy rain between the end of December and the beginning of January took the lake level to over 15.5 feet, which is about 9 inches over the spillway. Again, due to the heavy rain, the turbidity levels have risen to 2.4. These high levels will drop back unless we experience more extremely heavy rain. However, all tests were within the water quality range and all samples tested were negative. There were 2 leaks detected in the Kilmarnock area and were due to be repaired within the first half of the month. The check valve at the Mackay Road Reservoir has been replaced, and Dan is in the process of adjusting the altitude valve to respond to the now corrected inflows. The Public Works Committee has been working in conjunction with the Finance Committee, and we've begun the planning of a 10-year capital plan. This was our first meeting of the combined committees. We discussed a wide range of items ranging from water filtration, water pressure problems, land acquisition for the permanent reservoir, and filtration systems, and the somewhat thorny problem of how to raise revenues without placing too onerous a burden on our residents. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Cleve. We have a motion to accept the Public Works report.
I'll make that motion.
Bruce, seconder Alan. Any questions to Cleve? All in favor? Carried. Okay, Bruce, finance and capital planning.
I don't have a written report tonight. The board had asked the Finance and Capital Planning Committee to work on preparing a capital plan for the Public Works Department. Our committee has met several times. We've met with the Public Works Committee, and we're working towards completing a capital plan for the Public Works Department. We hope to have that ready for the April AGM. It's going to take a fair bit of time. There's a lot of work involved. There's not a lot to report right now, but we have a very strong committee, and we're working towards that plan and having it complete. That would be my report, but we're still working on it.
We have a, great. Okay, we'll move on to new business. The first item on our agenda is to talk about investigating the possibility of changing our water billing cycle. Since the summer, especially with Ken Carter, who was here, who's the administrator from Bowser, we learned that a number of the improvement districts on the island do not bill every 2 months for water tolls. They bill quarterly. And we had quite a few discussions about some of the pros and cons and some of the potential cost savings of changing from 6 water billing periods per month to 4 water billing periods per month. So
Per year.
Per year, sorry, per year. So, what we need to do tonight is, I guess, I'm looking for a motion to direct our administrator and the public works superintendent to investigate that issue.
Well, I move that we ask our administrator and our public works superintendent to prepare a report on the implications of changing to a quarterly or 3 times a year system, and report to the board on that.
Alan, second. Any discussion?
No, other than I think it's a good idea, and Dan is in favour of it, I know.
So, would it be possible to have that report for our February meeting, do you think? That'd be enough time?
Depends on how much detail you're wanting to go into, I think. If you're simply looking for something fairly concise and with a few recommendations, I could probably do
I
that.
think we need to know the pros and cons and maybe a bit of a, I don't know, some projected savings. I don't know, what else do you want?
Well, we don't know if there's going to be cash flow problem at all.
That's what I'd like to know.
Does that propose a cash flow problem for us? By not having that revenue coming in bi-monthly sort of thing, would make any real difference to our cash flow. That's something I can think of.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
I'm not promising.
Okay.
I'll let you know in advance of the meeting.
So if we decided to change it, when would that happen?
Well, when we talked with Ken Carter about that, his recommendation was that we make the change so that it would fit into our current cycle. So that means it would have to be either at December or June. So if we can approve this by March, and then we've got the March landowners update to notify people and the May update to notify people, we probably could implement it in June. Just that the office needs a couple of months lead time too to change the whole process over, right?
And then we need to be speaking to the Redwater people about changing all
Yes,
of
about changing all the warranty. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that will affect landowners doing your billing too. It's going to increase because you're only being billed quarterly. So it'd be interesting to get any feedback from people. If you're going to end up paying, we're paying now $40 as the base every 2 months. So if it's going up to 50 or whatever it is, is that going to be a concern to landowners that they may not be, when it's overwhelming, or would they rather stay on a bi-monthly? So it'd be nice to get some feedback from people too, as to what their feelings are on the change. It won't be a change of rate, it's just you're going to pay a little bit more, less times a year, that's all.
But we do have the possibility for people to pay monthly anyway, right? They can opt to pay monthly regardless. So we'll just have to make that clear that that's
We
an
have very few
option.
people doing that, though.
But it might be more if we went on to that system.
Right.
So, yeah.
Did we vote?
Not yet.
No? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, then we wanted to have a discussion that may lead to some kind of decision here about office rental. We've had quite a bit of discussion about the costs of this building and the fact that 3/4 of it is sitting empty. So maybe I'll just open it to my colleagues to talk about that issue.
Well, it's been a concern of mine since Cleve and I have been on the board. The cost of heating and running this building is astronomical as far as I'm concerned. And right now we have only the credit union to help subsidize us with some rent here. I believe the previous board had a plan that they did want to rent other space, and I believe Al and I had looked the other day. The electrical system was upgraded when the building was bought. It looks like, without professional advice, there's a lot of power down in the electrical room downstairs. So I'm assuming when it was upgraded, the previous board had a plan to rent space. So I think there's, when we thought about it initially, we thought, well, geez, there's not a lot of electrical power here, and you know, it might be a reason why it's difficult to rent, but I don't think that's the case any longer. I think if somebody came in, you'd want to do their own tenant improvement. There's lots of implications with the, as Ann has said, with the title on the school. We're limited to who we can rent it to. Zoning might be a problem, but I think we need to get some people in here renting some space, and I think that we need to get some interest and then decide whether it's applicable or not. If we could get a sign out on the street or some advertising. We don't have to take anybody if they don't fit into what we have to provide here, but I think we should be trying to get somebody with some interest to approach us and then look at the details of whether we could accommodate them in renting space. But I really think that we need to make some kind of a diligent effort to rent some more of this space while we remain here. It's costing us too much money.
Maybe we could approach some property rental people to see what they can come up with, because it's going to have to be a targeted clientele that we rent to. So
we can probably only rent it out as offices. We can't, there's really not much else that's under the zoning. So, you know, if we target it, then we're bringing it down even more into a narrower.
I think we need to put it up for rent and get some interest. And then, once you get some interest, then you do the investigating to find out whether you can accommodate them or not. You know, I think you can get somebody to show some interest, and if they want office space, then you go to the regional district and say, you know, we want to lease some space out here and get office space. Can we do it or can't we? And then you go back to your client and tell them we can accommodate you, we can.
Right. Right now we're renting, as we know, the credit union, but it's up. What's the lease is up in April?
The end of, beginning of May, and it's always been their plan, even from the time they came here, to eventually move over to the credit union proper. They've been planning an expansion there.
But to rent that to them, what did we have to do? We had to take a special permit out, didn't we?
It's called a temporary use permit. Yes.
Right. So we would have to do that again if we rent it to somebody else. So that's sort of another hurdle that we have. And we can't take a long-term tenant because we don't know what's going to happen as far as the title of the school is
we
concerned.
might get evicted.
Yeah, or our mortgage comes up for renewal in December.
Well, you have experience, Carol.
And
So, okay.
I know we look alike.
I know we do.
I was confused these two ladies. Would it be a project that you could handle?
Within certain parameters, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind sort of, because I rented the post office.
That's what I'm thinking about.
And I can, I can sort of get the process going. And if we get it leased, then it would be up to the administration to take care of the rest of it.
I certainly feel that to handle it in-house would be more appropriate than going out to outside people at this point in time.
Well, if we went,
It's
yeah,
too
if we went
iffy.
outside people, we'd have to pay them, so
Yes.
we can try that, yeah.
So I would make a motion for Anne to be sort of a project person to sort of oversee it and see what she could rally together. Do a little bit of advertising, give her authorization for a little bit of money for advertising, for a sign. I don't think we're talking about a lot of money, are we?
No, I'll do the same process as I did for the post office, so it's not a huge amount, maybe a couple of $100 altogether, I'm guessing.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay.
So we have a motion then for Anne to take the lead in seeing if we can find somebody to review.
Yep. Okay, I'll start soon. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Very good. Would you be reporting back at the next board meeting now? Maybe
Yep.
where you're at? Yep. Okay. The next item of business is something that none of us knew about. The Local Government Act, Section 755, requires that UBID establish a court of revision. And that's basically a three-person panel, I guess, that is available to hear and adjudicate landowners' concerns about their assessment notice. So if people disagree with being classified as either an A or a B property, or there's some information on that assessment form that they dispute, then they can come before this court of revision. Would someone, okay, thanks, Terry. I'm impressed. Yeah. Thank you. So, Terry Crispin,
Who?
Terry Reynolds, and Walter Johnson.
Is it friend or
Maybe I'll
foe?
ask before you leave tonight if you'll just make sure that Ruth has your phone number so she knows how to get a hold of you. Thank you. You're not likely to even get a call.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. So you get credit and you don't have to do anything for it. The next item that we have is some new policies that we want to table tonight. We have two of them. The first one is an election policy. We've been talking about this for some time, and we talked about it at the December special meeting. The intent of this policy is primarily to allow for an advanced poll. So in order to do that, we're no longer going to be having nominations from the floor unless absolutely no one stands, then the board can make a decision about having nominations from the floor. This policy replaces the April 20th election policy, which was a one-pager. The new policy is 7 pages long, and it spells out in quite a bit of detail all of the requirements for eligibility, who can vote, voters lists, how we'll handle the advanced voting, keeping ballots safe, all of those kinds of issues. So I'd like to table that and look at making a decision at the February meeting. That will allow us an opportunity to put into the March landowners update information about the new election process.
Would we post this on our website after it's been approved?
I would think so. Yeah.
We're not going to do all our policies on the website, are we?
No? You think you should?
Over due course, I think it's probably a good idea. It's a timing thing, but this one is, I think, quite important. Not that they're all important, but be a good way of people have a chance to read it once it's been approved or not. But I think all our policies should eventually probably. I don't see why they shouldn't go on the website. Not we have to make that decision now, but just I just asked about this one whether it would, and I just think that that one should go on our website eventually, before.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has any objection.
No, that's fine.
Okay. The second policy that I'd like to table is called Responsibilities of the Board, Chair, and Trustees. This policy replaces a current policy called Responsibilities of the Board and Chair, I think. It basically spells out what the chair's role is, what the trustees do. It talks about the decision-making process, and the new piece in this is that it specifically identifies the duties that have not been delegated to the administrator. So those are things like appointment of officers and employees, conditions of employment, termination of employment, approval of bylaws and policies, and disposal of assets. So we'll table that, and again, hopefully deal with that next month at the February meeting. Okay. Okay, the last item of business is the coffee time. We've now tried having a time available for the community to drop in and just have coffee and an informal chat twice. We did it over the summer for 3 or 4 times, and we did it for November, December, and January. And I think we had a conversation about whether you feel it was successful and useful, or whether you want to continue, or what you'd like to do about it.
Well, Alan and I did the one in January.
We had a nice chat.
We had a nice chat. Yeah. It was very quiet, but nobody came to that one, and I think, how many came in December?
We had 3.
Well, Bruce and I did the first one. We got double.
It's generally been fairly unsuccessful, unfortunately. We're hoping that it would be an opportunity for, maybe we haven't made a diligent enough effort to communicate that to the public and to people, but we thought it was a good idea. Unfortunately, like I say, it hasn't panned out. We have to make a decision whether we want to try it again, or whether we need to, Harry said you never heard about it. No, but I think it was posted in the Landowners Update. We have talked about it at a couple of meetings.
We put it on the website too, didn't we?
Yeah.
So
You haven't had enough time to screw up on it.
well, the other thing is maybe like meetings tonight, we are available after the meeting. If anybody wants to stay for 10 minutes after the meeting tonight, I know we'll have a question period here. Maybe this is a better opportunity than wasting time during the week, or maybe there's a better time. Somebody can ask this question after when we get into the question period. Maybe we should be changing the time on it. It's we were doing it on Tuesday afternoons from 1 to 2 o'clock. Maybe that's not a good time to do it. Maybe somebody wants to phone in and make an appointment. I don't know whether that would work or not, but
Wasting your time.
if somebody wanted to phone and make an appointment with Ruth and say, I'd like to talk to either specify the trustees, or I'd like to talk to a couple of trustees, or go ahead.
Yeah, the main point being that we're open, and we'll talk whenever, so I think we've left that venue open without coming in, sitting here and waiting for people to come in.
Send a book invitation about that, maybe.
He's got the invitation too. He's taking advantage of it the way it should.
So do we have consensus that we won't set another time, and we'll just make ourselves available if people call, or do it after these meetings?
Yeah, I think
We can make a decision at another board meeting. Maybe we'll get some feedback from the audience here.
Yeah, we can always reinstitute it.
I'd wait till we get some feedback, and then we can try it again any time. We don't have to make a decision now. We're just saying that unfortunately it hasn't been successful, and maybe somebody's got some better suggestions of how to handle it, or maybe we're just doing such a wonderful job that nobody wants to talk to us.
That's probably it.
They just don't want to talk to the chair.
There's some eye rolls there.
Virtually for everybody.
So that's the end of our new business. We'll open